Hello and welcome to the Digital Lounge. I'm your host, Mark, and today I'm joined by Crimson's Chief Data Officer, Ian Bobbett. Ian recently wrote a thought-provoking blog on how organizations can use data ethically in the digital age. In this episode, we'll explore how to balance innovation with responsibility, why compliance can be a strategic advantage, and how governance and AI ethics are shaping the future of business. Ian, welcome to the show. It's lovely to
Thanks,
have you
Mark.
back.
Great to
So,
see you.
yes, likewise. So, I'd like to start, if I may, by just that kind of overarching thought around balancing innovation and ethics. And I know a lot of our customers are wrestling with that thought at the moment. In your blog, you wrote that you can move fast and still do things right. Uh, but many organizations, as I say, are feeling torn between the speed of innovation and doing the right ethical thing. How do you advise businesses to strike that balance without stifling innovation?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's funny when we write things down, they often sound really simple, but the honest truth is it's quite a tricky path, and I think you mentioned the word in your question actually, Mark, which was balance, and I think balance is a really important word here. A lot of it is down to getting the fundamentals right, but also trying to be sensible, let's say. Foundationally, you have to know that you can trust your data. You have to be confident in your data quality, your data provenance, permissions, and you have to know that it's on a secure platform, so that you have to have that strong starting place to enable that innovation. So if you've got strong foundations, what that means is that you've kind of already jumped the gun a little bit. So the data that you're using, you trust, you know where it's come from. It gets you off to a solid start. And having that strong data foundation is really critical. Balance, again, that needs to be balanced with a good dose of common sense. It's really important to overlay some clear thinking, I suppose, in trying to understand what you're trying to achieve. Would you be comfortable if someone was using your data in that way? And should a regulator or a customer or a colleague come and ask you, could you explain and justify why you use data in that way? I think that common sense component is really important. And you also have to add into that best practice. And there's a technical element for that. So checking for bias, and there may be more governance-based best practice. So do you want an ethics committee, although that ethics committee needs to be accountable without being, hold people accountable without being onerous, to make sure that data is used in that right way. So I suppose the kind of key message perhaps is that don't treat ethics as a post-development check. It should be embedded in your considerations throughout your development of AI solutions, machine learning solutions, and phased into all of your kind of aspects of work. So that ensures that you've got privacy, it ensures fairness, and ensures that you're being transparent. And I suppose I'll go back to that original or earlier comment, perhaps, of be sensible. Companies want to innovate, and that's great, but it is important that you innovate in the right way, but don't overlay too many layers and responsibilities and checks. It needs to be balanced, and I suppose balance remains the key word to answer that, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I'd like to move on to specifically GDPR. And you made the point that compliance frameworks like GDPR aren't just a burden. They can actually strengthen trust and relationships.
Yeah.
With the UK's new Data Use and Access Act, How should universities, businesses rethink compliance as a strategic asset, not just that burden that some people might see it as?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's quite a difficult question to answer in a way, because I think everyone who works in the data industry, we've mainly seen legislation as a bit of a stick rather than a carrot. That's because the fines can be really substantial. I think it's about 4% of annual turnover, 17, maybe 17.5 million pounds in maximum fines. Whereas we should probably try and move our thinking a little bit towards seeing it as an opportunity to build trust with colleagues and customers or users. Um, because I suppose, in its essence, what the legislation is asking for is fairness and transparency. Not it doesn't ask you to limit your use of data or not to do things. It asks you to do so in a transparent and fair way. Which when you think about it, that's like a completely reasonable request, right? That's not a bad thing to expect from a business. So how do you go about doing that? Well, I think accessibility is really important, making sure you can communicate to your customers, to your users, how you're going to use their data in a language that people actually understand. Quite often you'll see technical jargon, which doesn't necessarily clear things up. And, training is really important here, making sure that colleagues are aware of this, make sure they understand how it will help them and users. I think that's really important, making sure that colleagues understand their personal responsibilities, how data should be used. And to me, that kind of is a bit of an opportunity to build trust in your brand, making sure, because when you think about it, I suppose, if you're then using data ethically, the outcome for your consumer, your customer, your student, whatever, is positive.
Yeah.
So, just having a good, clear set of rules is not quite enough to me. You build trust by giving them a better experience, your customers a better experience, and your colleagues a better experience, actually. So you need to train and encourage your colleagues to have that mindset of positive outcomes. So building this AI solution, building this machine learning solution, it will make people's lives better. Off
Yeah.
silly can of baked beans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make it, but I think that general attitude is really important. And one other thing I will say, and we sometimes forget this, there is an obligation, both directly and indirectly, that impacts data quality about customers. So if you were to remove all legislation in the world, still every data person in the world would say, you need better quality data. You need better quality data. It needs to be higher quality. The legislation actually supports that in a lot of ways. And what it says is, if you have data about people that you don't need, get rid of it. Well, that, again, completely reasonable thing to say. And when you've got better data, you make better decisions. And when you put in place things like clear ownership of data, people are accountable for that quality of data. Again, it enables better decisions. And when you've got better quality and a better understanding of your data assets, that accelerates your understanding of your customers and your users. And that makes you much more able to meet their needs and desires in the future. So I think, it's not going to drive huge value into your business directly, but good adherence to these kind of regulations and legislation, I think, actually has a net positive benefit on businesses.
Yeah. That makes total sense. And what you were saying before goes back to your philosophy around data, doesn't it? If people understand what's in it for them, ultimately, then there's an incentive there themselves to contribute. It's the same kind of philosophy, isn't it? Ian, I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned in your blog again, which is the risk of bias, like the recruitment models that reinforce gender imbalance, for example. You also shared 3 simple ethical questions organizations should ask. Could you expand on those questions and where companies often miss the mark with AI ethics?
I don't know that I won't bring up instances where customers maybe miss the mark with ethics, because actually most customers are really good. But I do think there are things that we should be asking ourselves always. And from perhaps the more technical side of things, do I have to use personally identifiable information? Great example is when you're building a machine learning solution, you don't really need to know who the person is. So typically you'll see technicians and data scientists use a non-intelligent key. They because of the scale of data they use, they don't care that your name is Joe Blogs or Janet Blogs. What they care about is data quality, and I identify that is an entity that I'm interested in. And modern technology allows us to go a wee bit further now. So building things like synthetic data, if you've got information that is very sensitive, modeling your original data to create a synthetic data set gives you an additional level of obfuscation that makes use of that data a bit safer. Now, when you apply it, obviously you need to know who the person is, but just knowing when PII data is relevant is really important. I think the second question I asked was around purpose. So I'm a big believer in this, by the way. I think before you start using data, it's really important that you have to understand why you're doing that, and you have to be confident that when you're doing that, that's the right way to use that data, and you're using it for the right reasons. I guess an example might be if you've got a credit score and you use that on a customer that's buying a house, well, that's completely reasonable. But you wouldn't use a credit score to decide whether to offer someone a place in a university, or whether you should sell them branded or own brand baked beans. Baked beans twice in a podcast. But purpose is really, really critical, because you need to understand why you're doing things. And when you understand why you're doing things, I do think it helps contextualize what you should be comfortable in using in that solution. And the final thing is I think the question I ask is, would you be happy if your data was used that way? And again, we're back to common sense. I think common sense and training come out a lot in this conversation, by the way, Mark. But common sense to make sure that you'd be happy if it was your elderly relative, you'd be happy that their data was being used in a fair way, and you'd be happy that personally your data was being used in a fair way. And to enable that, you need to make sure that your colleagues have the right training, and it's really critical that they're empowered to ask questions. And ask those common questions. Where did the data come from? Do I trust the source? Have we collected it fairly? Am I using it for a purpose that benefits the stakeholders I've got? And those simple questions, my personal belief is that they're often the best. One thing I will add to that, it's also really important that you keep a record of those decisions, because once you've got a record of those decisions, and again, it doesn't need to be onerous. It could be, in your markdown. It could be, in your output presentation. But just keeping a note or a log, if you work that way, of why you've made those decisions, and that you're comfortable with those decisions.
Okay. Thank you. I'm conscious we're fast running out of time, Ian, so I'm going to come to my last question, if that's okay, which is
Course.
we already have a trust framework that's been developed by you and the team. I was wondering whether you could explain what it is, how it works in practice, how it's helping organizations build trust in their data strategies.
I'll do my best, Mark. So the framework is designed to look at the 6 aspects of how data and AI are managed and used in your organization. So security, i.e. keeping your data safe, knowing where it is at the right times, is obviously of paramount importance. Governance, so management, ownership, and use of data is a second component, and very closely aligned to that is compliance, so alignment with rules and regulations. 3 other areas that we tend to focus on: data quality. Long-standing golden rule in data is garbage in, garbage out. So, we do have a responsibility to hold high-quality data, and we discussed it earlier, Mark, that does have halo benefits. Reliability, so making sure that when you build solutions, they perform at the required level and continue to do so. Some machine learning and AI solutions will decline in performance over time. And the 6th area that we look at is ethics, so making sure that there's oversight of how we're using data. And we work across those 6 areas to improve how you use data and information in your business. And that a very high level process around review, collaborate, recommend, and implement. And we can help in technical areas such as the implementation of purview, and practical areas such as red teaming or setting up an ethics committee, and making sure you've got the right documentation in place. So we work with internal stakeholders to guide them down that path, and help them sometimes formulate their best practice guidelines as well. So that's the Crimson Trust framework in a quick nutshell.
Fabulous. Thank you very much for your time today in sharing your thoughts around AI ethics, and hopefully we'll have you on the show again in the near future. Thank you. Okay, so Ian, so today we've learned that ethical data use isn't just about slowing innovation. It can be about designing trust, fairness, and transparency into everything, from AI models to governance structures. If you'd like to read Ian's full blog, it's on the Crimson website, blog.crimson.co.uk. You'll find it there. Search for data, from data to decisions using information ethically in the digital age. Until next time, I'm Mark, and this has been the Digital Lounge.